Gregor MacGregor was born on December 24th, 1786, in Edinburgh, Scotland. He was a descendant of the MacGregor clan, one of the most famous in Scotland. They were best known for being one of the many victims of the 1603 proscription, which caused the suffering of the MacGregor name for nearly 2 centuries. This outlawed the use of the MacGregor last name. Many male MacGregors could not use their surname or own property, and were usually hunted down and killed by rival clans, such as the Campbells. They were also famous for their most popular member, Rob Roy MacGregor. He was considered the Robin Hood of the Highlands. Gregor MacGregor claimed later in his life to have been born in Glengyle, the clan's ancestral home. However, despite him being related, he was several generations removed from the clan members who lived there. In truth, he was simply the son of an East India Company ship captain, whom died when Gregor was 8, leaving him alone to be raised by his mother. At age 16, he attended Edinburgh University. However, he dropped out shortly after, when he joined the British military. Gregor joined the military during the Napoleonic Wars, which allowed him to reach the title of lieutenant in less than a year, when it would normally have taken him 3 years. He met a woman named Maria Bowalter, who was the daughter of a Royal Navy admiral in 1804, and married her in 1805. Not only was she the daughter of an admiral, but she was related to 2 generals and a member of Parliament. 2 months after his marriage with her, he bought the rank of captain in the 57th Foot in the British Army. In his time in the military, he served in the Peninsular War. In 1812, he joined the Republican side in the Venezuelan War of Independence and quickly became a general. He then spent the next 4 years operating against the Spanish on behalf of both Venezuela and New Granada. His successes in the military include a fighting retreat through northern Venezuela in 1816. In 1817, he captured Amelia Island under a mandate from revolutionary agents to conquer Florida from the Spanish, and there proclaimed a short-lived Republic of the Floridas. He also oversaw 2 enormous operations in New Granada during 1819. He also fought in the Battle of Albuera, which was an engagement between the Spanish, British, and French, near the small Spanish village of Albuera. Because of the praise this battle would receive, MacGregor would always make much association with it. On May 24th, 1810, MacGregor formally retired from the British service, receiving back the money he had paid for the ranks of ensign and captain, and he returned to Britain.
The theory of crime we will be discussing that seems to best fit and describe the crimes committed by Gregor MacGregor is David Matz's drift theory. Matza believed that crime would be committed when the social controls in an environment were weakened. Some examples of social controls could be having a family, a marriage, a job, or a heavy police presence in the area. Virtually any societal policing of one's actions would be enough to keep someone from committing crimes. If the opposite is true, and the societal policing factors are very weak, then people are more susceptible to criminal acts. Matza revolved his concept of drift theory around people drifting in and out of crime, dependent on the strength of these social control factors. A core concept of drift theory is the idea of soft determinism, wherein it takes the same basic principle of determinism, the belief that all events have a cause, but deviates from determinism in that soft determinism suggests human free will is intertwined with the inevitable causal chain. Simply, some amount of free will exists in contrast to hard determinism, wherein free will simply does not exist. Gregor MacGregor's crimes, in particular, were perpetrated in a unique time where the social controls of his environment were pitifully weak, along with the factors in his own life. He was a decorated soldier, a well-respected man and figure in his community, but when the social controls in his society were weak, he consequently drifted into criminal activity. So MacGregor sold the lie to at least 250 people in Britain at the time, earning him an incredulous sum of over £200,000. That amount of money today, adjusting for inflation, would be well over £10 million. That enormous sum of money stolen from the hopeful colonists would not be the worst consequence of what MacGregor's actions entailed. The colonists traveled to Poyais on the Honduras Packet and the Kennersley Castle, 2 boats, and they were greeted by a wasteland filled with rubble and abandoned foundations. Few people realized that they had actually been duped by MacGregor and spent weeks trying to find the authorities of the made-up colony. Being that there was no civilization, there were no authorities, just wasteland, the colonists were not adequately prepared with food, drinks, and any nutrition for the ride back to Britain. Only a little over 40 of the 250 colonists would survive the trip back. 40 people out of 250 colonists. When close advisors and comrades to MacGregor had found out about his devious plan, he was tried for fraud and miraculously he was acquitted, be it by a poor system of justice at the time and with some other curious help. Actually, a few survivors of his Poyais scheme were so bought into the scam that they actually came to his defense come the trial, and the first-hand testimony of the survivors was enough to tip the scales in his favor. All in all, MacGregor's fraudulent lies earned him a fortune at the cost of over 200 lives he sent to their graves. The theory of crime we will be discussing that seems to best fit and describe the crimes committed by Gregor MacGregor is David Matz's drift theory. Matza believed that crime would be committed when the social controls in an environment were weakened. Some examples of social controls could be having a family, a marriage, a job, or a heavy police presence in the area. Virtually any societal policing of one's actions would be enough to keep someone from committing crimes. If the opposite is true, and the societal policing factors are very weak, then people are more susceptible to criminal acts. Matza revolved his concept of drift theory around people drifting in and out of crime, dependent on the strength of these social control factors. A core concept of drift theory is the idea of soft determinism, wherein it takes the same basic principle of determinism, the belief that all events have a cause, but deviates from determinism in that soft determinism suggests human free will is intertwined with the inevitable causal chain. Simply, some amount of free will exists in contrast to hard determinism, wherein free will simply does not exist. Gregor MacGregor's crimes, in particular, were perpetrated in a unique time where the social controls of his environment were pitifully weak, along with the factors in his own life. He was a decorated soldier, a well-respected man and figure in his community, but when the social controls in his society were weak, he consequently drifted into criminal activity.
We examined Gregor MacGregor's crimes from a drift theory perspective, as there was little social control in Nicaragua during the time of his crimes. In addition, we saw signs of a warmonger in his private battles, indicating some slight levels of soft determinism. It is not evident that MacGregor used any techniques of neutralization, however, as there are no accounts of MacGregor's reasoning behind his scheme. However, we can draw some sense of warmongering from his lineage. MacGregor's grandfather, Gregor the Beautiful, was a famous clansman of Gaelic descent. Similar to the United States and the late 1700s and early 1800s, Central America did not have a stable government in place, and could likely be compared to the United States version of the Wild West. Following a victory over Spanish forces on the Caribbean coasts of Venezuela, MacGregor and a group of soldiers began to seek out remaining Spanish forces. According to Victor Allen of History Today, MacGregor and his troops operated from sequestered bases along the Caribbean Cays. MacGregor knew the islands near mainland Nicaragua quite well. We can see on this next slide a map of the Mosquito Coast where MacGregor focused his attacks and ultimately the region where Poyais was located. In these areas, there are fleeing troops and few remaining citizens, and as such, there was little social control and virtually no government. MacGregor saw an opportunity, as British citizens would not know the state of a given island or territory, or if it even existed at all. This lack of information, and more importantly, lack of social control, is what allowed MacGregor to be successful. In addition to fraud, MacGregor was also charged with conspiracy when he was eventually captured in Britain. Before investors boarded the infamous Honduras packet, the ship that carried passengers from Europe to Poyais, they exchanged their Scottish silver sterlings and British pounds for Poyais dollars, a fictitious currency created by MacGregor and printed with the help of unnamed others, which is where the conspiracy charge fits in. On this next slide, we can see some of the policy implications regarding MacGregor's crimes. Unfortunately, these are difficult to define as no direct legislation was drafted in response, largely due to the times. As we know, in the 1800s, communication was greatly delayed as the only way of communicating with Europe was through messengers traveling overseas via ship. When MacGregor returned to London in 1827, he was charged with fraud and conspiracy. Fraud is currently defined as the intentional use of deceit to deprive another individual of money, property, or a legal right. Conspiracy can be loosely understood to be a scheme by one or more people to commit illegal acts. The unnamed individuals which helped MacGregor print his Poyais dollars would be the additional individuals that would fit the charge of conspiracy. Interestingly, MacGregor was tried and acquitted after 8 months behind bars, and even had several survivors of the original Fire Festival defend his name in the press.